by electing Prime Minister Farage and Reform UK as the government, we might as well be electing Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tony Blair was conspiring with his globalist friends to impose digital ID top down on this country. Labour said they weren't going to do it. It wasn't in the manifesto. The public weren't consulted. Literally, Dark Lord himself just decreed Britain is going to have digital ID. No debate, no vote in this country. Margaret Thatcher still reigns in so many places, in the minds of conservatives, in the minds of people on the right. It is like an impenetrable brick wall. Well, I, as somebody who wants change in this country, am meant to just clap that on. We know the Trump administration doesn't care about free speech because they've spent the past 9 months banning anti-Semitism wherever they go. But I really have no faith in reform to sort anything out.
Hello and welcome to The Current Thing with me, Nick Dixon, and returning to the show today is Dr. Neema Parvini, aka Academic Agent, and we will be talking about his move to the centre-left and his recent series debunking right-wing ideas, so that is sure to annoy virtually everyone, so it should be fun. Neema, how are you doing?
Thanks for having me, Nick. Very pleased to come back to the show.
Always good to
glad that we can have this conversation across the political aisle, Nick.
Across the political aisle. That's hilarious. Yeah, well, no, you think that, but I'm actually centre-left as well now. I've just had William Clouston on, so you just actually, we're all centre-left, so it's in vain.
Oh, right.
Yeah, no, it must be annoying. You'll have to pivot again to far left, which is what you'll probably do. But firstly then, why this move to the so-called centre-left, and why did you decide to embark upon this series, Neema Parvini versus right-wing ideas?
I recently brought out a new book, which is called Applied Elite Theory. And a lot of the chapters of that book are collected from articles that I've written over the past 3 or 4 years. And when you're putting together a book like that, you have to kind of sequence them, and then you have to actually kind of look over, what you've done, how it kind of coheres as a set of ideas, and you have to write a kind of little intro preface thing to go at the front. And as I was reading over my own political journey over the past 3-4 years and reflecting on the intellectual journey a lot of us have been on, and reflecting on my actual beliefs and thoughts, and the whole process of writing this preface, it occurred to me that I'm in quite a different place now than where I was, let's say, 4 years ago, in terms of the way I think about, what is known as the online right, or you used to be called the dissident right at one point, the way ideas are discussed, all of those sorts of things. And reflecting on that journey is really, what is the journey? It's one of disappointment, Nick. It's one of profound there was a sense of something exciting happening at a moment. Nominally, it was afforded by a figure like Donald Trump, right? It was afforded by a little moment there in which people were ready to question their beliefs again. People were ready to really think about what you might call philosophical and political first principles. But unfortunately, and this happens time and again, not only in online politics, but in academia, in artistic movements, I would say that the victory of Trump last year has sadly led to the ossification of what was happening back then, and slowly but surely, what was an exciting, vital, and vivid intellectual space has dwindled into a kind of cheerleading squad for whatever it is the Trump administration is doing in the current week, which is, kind of disappointing. I remember back in my undergraduate days reading a play by a French absurd playwright called Eugene Ionesco, and it was called Rhinoceros. And in that play, there's this guy who's in this town, and slowly but surely, all of the inhabitants of this town start to turn into rhinoceroses or rhinoceri. I'm not sure what the plural is, but so you've got a friend, but then he's turned into a rhinoceros. You can't talk to him anymore because, he's a rhinoceros. And really, that's how I felt, Nick, as time has gone on. Even like people I was close to in the kind of online thing, people I talked to all the time, over time, they've just basically turned into this kind of baying moronic mob, really. And, when it was happening in America, it was happening over there. Okay. So there was always a certain sort of distance between like us and the Americans. But now, after watching it happen over there for 10 years and seeing where it's gone, right? Seeing where it's gone, and we can get into some of the specifics later because a lot of the essays in applied elite theory actually discuss how the story of Trump has been an applied story of what the elite theorists call the iron law of oligarchy, i.e., this once marginal figure who was against the system, against the regime, has over time become co-opted by special interests within that regime and now more or less just does their bidding, right? So the Trump of today, in my view, is literally just a creature of the American military industrial complex in the same way that previous presidents have been. And in fact, if you have a look at kind of foreign policy, there's a continuity agenda, even like through Trump 1, Biden, Trump 2. Like it almost, if you didn't know that there was a change in president, you wouldn't actually know that there'd been, like in terms of the nuts and bolts of American foreign policy, that has not changed. Okay. So, yeah, but my assessment really is that Trump has been kind of neutered by certain forces within American politics, and we're increasingly nakedly in hock to a certain lobby over there. We don't need to get into all of that. You know who I'm talking about. And so for us to witness all of that over the past decade, and then for literally exactly the same thing to be coming over here with Farage and Reform and so on, I just can't believe that people can't see that it's like just exactly the same stuff. And continually, I'm surprised by the failure of anybody to be able to learn any lessons, even like really basic lessons. Like for example, Nick, recently there was this Sarah Puchin comments over the diverse people in adverts and so on, and that whole story played out as if it was 2015. I was kind of thinking, like, what's that? Like, we're just going to replay the script of 10 years ago as if nothing's happened, as if nobody's learned anything. But apparently we are, and everybody has to play along with it. And I'm meant to get excited about it, but I can't get excited about it because I've just lived through the past decade. So yeah, for a lot of those reasons, I think at this time I don't want to be part of that cheerleading squad that's just going to create the conditions for a reform UK government. Because I mean, what are we doing? Let's just call a spade by electing Prime Minister Farage and Reform UK as the government. We might as well be electing Julia Hartley-Brewer. And as I've been kind of watching various debates play out, Julia Hartley-Brewer may be my least favorite person on any of the TV stations or anything. So I don't want to elect Julia Hartley-Brewer. I find her even worse than James O'Brien these days. So yeah, this is a sincere, and then it got me thinking, well, what is it where do I disagree with the likes of a Julia Hartley-Brewer? Okay. And I mean, there's some things that we agree on. So I've talked about sensible center-left, Nick. Okay. So the sensible part is, I'm not woke. We know that. I don't think any of us are going to be ever woke again, right? I'm against immigration. But let's not forget that is the stated position of Prime Minister Keir Starmer as per the Islands of Strangers speech, where he called it a free market libertarian experiment run by the Tories on this country. So it's like even the Labour Prime Minister is against mass immigration at this point. Okay, so that does not define.
He did regret it
on certain days, but as far as I know, he's never actually walked back that part of it, right? And then and this is the bit where I would, probably diverge from Julia Hartley-Brewer. I think she's not sensible, and that is I'm against foreign interests and interference running our politics. And again, we can look over to America. In America, they've just had this earth-shattering interview between Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes, where they are literally having that conversation. But in our politics, in this country, we're supposed to pretend that hasn't just happened. We're supposed to just continue playing our role as if that hasn't happened. It's just like, I don't understand. We all have the same internet, so we see what's happened over there, and now we're going to wish that exact same thing happening over here. Do you understand what I mean? By which I mean, the whole reason Tucker and Nick Fuentes are having that conversation is because since Trump has been the president again, that issue has been front and center. And part of the reason it's been front and center is that it appears that his administration is captured by foreign interests. We've just watched in our politics Tommy Robinson go on a humiliation tour of Israel. And what I, as somebody who wants change in this country, am meant to just like clap that on and defend, Maccabee Tel Aviv like Julia Hartley-Brewer. To me, that is not sensible, Nick. That's not sensible. That's not a centered position. I might as well keep on going through. The center part of it is simply rising above what I call slop. What do I mean by slop? That is your bread and butter kind of culture war issue that facilitates what some of my buddies have called the endless conversation. Strikes me that the system is always very happy with culture war slop. Look at what J.K. Rowling said today. Hermione owned type material. Okay, everybody's comfortable with that. That's been going on a decade as well. And it strikes me that the system loves to talk about ephemera of that nature, while the actual deep structure never changes. And to come back to reform, that, during the summer when Tony Blair was conspiring with his globalist friends to impose digital ID top down on this country, Labour said they weren't going to do it. It wasn't in the manifesto. The public weren't consulted. Literally, his Toniness, Dark Lord himself, just decreed Britain is going to have digital ID. No debate, no vote. Labour just said, yeah, we're going to do it. What was Nigel Farage doing? He was moaning about smoky bacon crisps and, whether talking about soy milk and oat milk. Literally, you can go back and have a look. Okay, so that's the level of seriousness Nigel's bringing to things, while people who are actually serious about getting things done in the system just work tirelessly to it doesn't even matter if 90% of the country are against it. They signed a petition of almost 4 million people, Nick, and the government just said, yeah, we're doing it anyway, we don't care. They didn't even have a debate. So, centered means rising above slop, which is obviously designed to stop you talking about things that actually matter. And then the final part, the left part, which is probably the most controversial bit, basically means being against free market neoliberal economics, which has been a long journey. I mean, if you know me, I started off as a libertarian. I wrote a book 5 years ago called The Defenders of Liberty, where I defended Austrian school and to some extent the Chicago School of Economics. As time has gone on, as my interest in politics and power have, and what has actually happened in the real world, and I've started to study just evidence, like what has actually happened, what has happened to our country, what has happened in other countries. I start to see that what may make sense in abstract theory, what makes logical sense, doesn't necessarily apply to the real world, because, to some extent, you need the government to do stuff, and government doing stuff to many people. And you see, to many people online, this is old hat. But the reality is, and you will know this as well as me, Nick, that in this country, Margaret Thatcher still reigns in so many places in the minds of conservatives, in the minds of people on the right, such that it is like an impenetrable brick wall. Okay, I've tried, and you just can't get through. And recently it was the 100th birthday of Thatcher, and literally up and down my timeline, everybody had to pay homage to Maggie. But what has it actually got our country? It is, and and this is the biggest part of it. Really, it's not simply an economic thing; it's a social thing too. Why do we have mass immigration? Why do we have low birth rates? Why were so many women dragooned into the workforce and sold the idea that being chained behind a desk and working for Microsoft was liberation? This was all neoliberalism, right? It wasn't Stalin doing that. It was Thatcher. It was neoliberal economics. It was Milton Friedman telling you that money doesn't see color. So that's why I think at the current time, sensible center left is the political formula I'm going with. Even if it proves unpopular in the short term, I still do not see reform. I mean, reform are set to sweep. All right, they're set to have an absolute landslide. And yet, within reform, I still don't really see any advance over stuff people would have said a decade ago. Reform literally act like the past 10 years have not even happened. And they want to have the conversation as if it was 2014, and we're not. Like, that's not where we've been. So I'm not going to just pretend that, we're just going to go back there. So that's my pitch, Nick. What do you reckon?
Yeah, no, there's lots I agree with. I mean, some small qualms would be when you talk about Fuentes and Carlson, and we're not having that conversation. I mean, one, we might just not have caught up with America, but more likely, the Israel lobby question is just much bigger in America. It's just we have the question here of one side saying that war is a genocide, the other side saying, what about the safety of Jewish people on British streets? So we have definitely that debate and the constant protests and all that.
No, we don't. We don't. When the synagogue thing happened, every single political party was absolutely united, and Keir Starmer said the same thing as Tommy Robinson. When Israeli hooligans were banned from Aston Villa, this only happened a couple of weeks ago, Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage, Rupert Lowe, every single Tory, and Tommy Robinson were on the same page. So let's not pretend that it's a two sides thing, because as far as I can see, every political party is on the same page. Right? Why? So you're asking me to basically segregate my mind and be like, right, over there in America, they're having this conversation, but I'm not meant to spot the same thing happening here. Why is that?
Well, I was trying to say that it rears its head here in slightly different ways, whereas in America, it's very much about funding and, our government is controlled by a foreign country, foreign entity, and those kind of things, which don't seem quite as relevant here because no one, it doesn't seem that we're as controlled by said foreign country here, but you may disagree. But I was saying it raises its head here in a slightly different way. That might be why that hasn't caught up here. That was just my claim. But Farage, you were a little harsh on Farage on digital ID because he did push back quite strongly on digital ID. You said he was talking about smoky bacon crisps. But, these are small sort of qualms with your opening statement. But the Thatcher thing is obviously completely right. And we can get into that because you talked about the free market in one of your videos. So I just had William Clouston on. So, it's not a free market podcast. But yeah, I think there are definitely compelling arguments there. And that debate is happening in things like NatCom here, and it's happening a little bit in the SDP. They're very small, of course. People like Nick Timothy agree with it, but yes, it's not really. There's no main political party that offers a combination of social conservatism and economic sort of more ideas to the left, which is I discussed with William Clouston. Why is that not offered when that's where most British people are? So that is strange. So in a way, you're just saying you're where most British people are, which is social conservatism combined with skepticism about a rampant neoliberal economics.
Well, I'm not sure. So, okay, this is where things get a little bit nuanced, because when you start saying, well, I'm a social conservative, the thing is that there are a lot of problems with conservatism as it has manifested, and it's not just the free market bit as well. And part of what I was doing in that series I mean, there are lots of like conservatives have a habit of always kind of being reactive, of how can I say, just thinking, just not actually thinking anything through, and just kind of reacting in the moment. You see this, on many issues. If you've been through enough news cycles, you see it enough times. So there are actually elements of the social conservative platform. There's one of the videos I made was on the notion of the family, the kind of bourgeois ideal of the 2.4 family being the highest good. I talked about birth rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of conservatives are really concerned. Like for a lot of people, a lot of conservatives, getting a job and starting a family is like the best thing you can possibly do, right? My analysis of the situation is that may have been correct at a certain time. It's not necessarily correct. It's not necessarily the be all and end all right now, because we're at a different moment in the civilizational cycle, and actually we need men of a different stripe for this moment. So I hesitate to just say, well, it's simply like a rearticulation of the SDP or something like that. Although I will say that in the current, like in theory, the closest thing to this actually exists in the Labour Party. It's called Blue Labour. I mean, they have some problems. They're pretty heavily Zionist, for example. But like in theory, that was the Morgan McSweeney idea, the whole Blue Labour thing. But we've seen the execution has been absolutely woeful. And part of the problem is, of course, that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are neoliberals. Really, they're basically just doing the bidding of Tony Blair. We know that. So it's kind of like they're wearing it as a mask rather than actually being it. They're trying to save. I mean, even now, what they're doing with taxes and so on is really just what people may have called 10 years ago austerity. It's just like David Cameron again, but they're in an even more dire situation now because of, well, I mean, literally because COVID racked up the biggest debt since World War II.
Yeah, I just saw Starmer attacking Kemi on austerity the other day. I thought you're going to do worse austerity. But, yeah, very interesting. I mean, Clouston basically agrees with Lord Glassman about Blue Labour. And as you say, McSweeney, he's very sympathetic to Blue Labour. He says not totally aligned, but sympathetic. But as you say, it hasn't been the agenda they followed. Maybe we could just go through some of your videos then, because I've watched all 8 of them. And I don't have like massive like data to come back. I just have my reckons. As I said, to use a Michelin Web thing, I'm just from a northern state comprehensive. I just have my little reckons, but I'll come back with a few things. So your first one is on ethno-narcissism, you called it. And your basic claim is that, okay, it's all right to, have this country with just one ethnicity if that's what you want, but you won't compete in the global market because if other nations use a much wider talent pool, they will just end up out competing you and they could essentially take you over. So I thought that was a reasonable point. It seems to me it's almost like all nations would have to go nationalist, and to some extent there's a sort of implied ethnic components that at the same time, which in a way is kind of a movement we see happening. We see there's a nationalist movement, obviously in America with MAGA, obviously in Germany, ADF and so on, and everywhere across Europe. Mm-hmm. So in a way, it's a kind of tacit multilateral agreement. And in a way, you could also say Brexit was us as typical pioneer legends doing that unilaterally and saying, right, we're getting out and we're sort of getting away from centralization. And, it's a sort of experiment. We don't know how it's going. And you could almost say the euro as well was an example of that. I was just thinking. But it's almost like to do it unilaterally is a risk, just like unilateral disarmament, which Corbyn advocates. But, so it seems to me it's something you'd all have to do at once. I mean, but I see your problem. If you just do it and the other countries don't, they will ultimately win.
Yeah, no, it's worth mentioning that this is not a defense of mass immigration. Okay, I was not saying you should have no control over your borders whatsoever. Okay, because of this, which I think a lot of people took it as, for some reason, as if I hadn't spent the past decade being against mass immigration. Okay, what I was talking about was a very specific incentives problem at the level of the individual firm or the individual football club, or then the individual country, and it's literally that problem of if everybody else is going around the world and hiring the best that they can find. If you're the one club or firm or country who's not doing that, do you risk losing competitive advantage against them? Do you fall behind? And this is one of those things. I mean, I've got a book here by John Mearsheimer called How States Think. And it's always this game of keeping up with the Joneses. It's not necessarily what you want to do, but if you don't do it, you get left behind, which is actually the argument Tony Blair uses to back up virtually all of his arguments, I've noticed over the years as well. What I was trying to do in that first video is seriously present this, like, what is the actual answer to that? Because it strikes me that let's just take the football as one example, right? If Manchester United were like, right, we're just going to only hire English, as an example, unless Manchester United could literally like hire the England football team, right? I.e., unless they could have a monopoly on the best English players, I think they'd struggle more than they are at the moment. I know you're, but you know what I'm saying, right?
3 wins on the trot, mate. Yeah,
they wouldn't be winning they wouldn't be winning like the Champions League and the league and so on.
Of course, in their greatest era, it was largely youth academy players combined with some Irish and Welsh. I take your point.
I understand, right? That Sir Alex Ferguson, one of the all-time greats, had a strong British core to that team, but that's not the way that. See, my point is that the game that once you've started with Eric Cantona and Ginola, and Arsenal have got Patrick Vieira and so on and so forth, the game has already started. And you fast forward 20 years, right? And the model now is not that Alex Ferguson model. It's like it's the Man City thing of some massively wealthy sheikh giving billions of dollars, and literally it's the Galacticos idea, right? Even though Barcelona were right there, the model has still become you just go around the world poaching the best players. That's the way. Would you agree? That is the way the game has gone from like Jimmy Hill in 1992, arguing like, make everything youth and stop all of this happening, to today. It's definitely not gone Jimmy Hill's way. Would you agree with that? It's gone the way of the Man City and the kind of rainbow coalition of players from around the world. My point was a purely technical one. Why has that happened? Mm-hmm. Right? What is what are the incentives for that happening? What are the counter arguments against that? Because it strikes me that the pure meritocracy model, okay, and you see it in its rawest form in football, because football's like almost like raw capitalism, if you want to put it that way. How do you stop it?
Yeah, well, the only way you stop it is with these kind of. Sorry.
How do you stop it if it wins? Is the point? It wins.
Yeah. No, it wins. The only way you stop it is with regulation. People have proposed you shouldn't be allowed to buy these teams from, outside the country, rich people buying the teams. You shouldn't just. There's financial fair players now coming a little bit, and people, your Gary Neville, when he's not mouthing off about politics, will say we need to stop some of this stuff. Yeah, the only way you need regulations to stop it. You'd all have to agree on it. That's the problem. It's like I was saying before. You'd all have to agree to not do brain drains from country. Everyone would have to sort of agree to it, wouldn't they? To sort of not compete on certain things. That's the problem with it. Though, to some degree, when you're talking about competing and falling behind, Brexit was an acceptance for a lot of people of financially falling behind a bit, for not being in the single market and all that, but gaining sovereignty. So that was an argument for some. It is a risk, and it's how isolationist can you be when you're in a global market. I understand all that. So you're saying, yeah, basically you can't be, but you can be to some degree, because we did do Brexit, for example, even though it might not be the smart. Well, Blair would say we're getting behind. It's not smart, but it's not smart. But we're doing it because we want to do it.
I guess the difficulty is, Nick. Okay, and this is where it's just pure realism, right? How do you sell it to the board of Man City? How do you sell it to a hedge fund? How do you sell it to the City of London? How do you sell it to the government? And the sell is, look, we have to take a hit in revenue, profit, GDP, etc. We have to take a hit in our competitiveness, okay, for these other reasons over here. And what I'm saying is, until you've got a really good answer to that question, it's going to be really hard to convince any of these firms on the individual level and governments on a country by country basis to do it, basically. And the reason I'm raising it is because we have an example in Italy right now of Giorgia Meloni, who was literally called a fascist by the press, who has come into power, is literally the prime minister of Italy, is massively, her whole platform was anti-immigration, and she is finding the incentives and constraints in front of her. Thomas Sowell wrote a book many years ago called Knowledge and Decisions, where he said, look, doesn't matter who you put in, they're going to face the same incentives and constraints in front of them. And probably Meloni has been sat down by her finance minister, who said, look, Georgia, if we don't take these Africans in, this whole sector is going to collapse here. We just need the GDP. And lo and behold, there's been a Meloni wave, just like there was a Boris wave.
All right. Yeah. Very interesting. Number two, you had racial superiority, which you just defined really as oppressing another race because you just think you're better, like slavery, and how it will always lead to a backlash. And of course, we're now in the phase of oppressing white people, which is just that the backlash is just about starting because everyone's sick of it. And this time it's not on claims of physical or mental superiority, but moral superiority, i.e. we're inherently evil. Well, I don't have much to push back on with this one because it's just obvious that if you oppress people, there will be a backlash. So I don't really have much pushback on that. But I don't know if is it? I'm not really sure why it was in there, this one, though, because I don't really see anyone saying that we should do that.
I think that there is, I see hundreds, thousands of comments every day. And in the current year, I'll grant, it's very difficult to tell if the people making these sorts of comments are real, if they're bots, if they're foreign agents, if they're literally Indians in call centers. We don't know anymore because the dead internet is a real thing, right? So it's hard to say. But you do see, I've seen a creeping in of this. I mean, it's never really been part of the nationalist scene that I've seen. Not that I was ever part of a nationalist scene, but from the ones that I paid attention to and listened to their shows and so on, that's never really been part of their thinking. But I would say it has crept in to the general kind of discourse over the past couple of years in a kind of hidden and implicit way. And it usually happened on the slop end. A lot of these developments happen on the slop end. I also think, and I'm just going to tell it to you straight, Nick, right? I also think it's been part of strategy of certain foreign countries to try to lean into this in order to, the players lean into these sorts of things, try to get people to, see, be comrades or allies on this front, and then the payoff is you're walking hand in hand with certain foreign country. So I've seen that as part of their playbook as well. So a lot of that sort of discourse actually comes in from that end, if that makes any sense. And you can usually tell because the rhetoric gets uglier. The rhetoric gets uglier with
foreign countries encouraging us to be racist online and start up meme accounts and dissident West or something, whatever they're called, or inevitable West.
Exactly. But it kind of it comes in with a lot of that, you see, and it's come in with a lot of the Middle East discourse and stuff like that. So that was not a feature 5 years ago, say, but it's become an increasing feature now, where another part of it as well, Nick, is that I think that a lot of people are done talking. They're fed up with the quote unquote debate. And so now there's a lot of short circuiting, kind of thought terminating phrases because they just can't be bothered anymore. And I think that the immigration debate, for example, has gone on for so long that I think a lot of people have just had it, and they're just going to I'm just going to stick a racial slur up there, or I'm just going to so there's been that as well. I also think it hasn't been helped that, there have been various times where there's been this kind of again, a discourse that I dislike, right? But I have seen it, of when you get I don't know, American accounts running down Europe, and then you get a counterballast like that. And again, these superiority kind of type discourses start to raise their head when the discourse becomes nasty in that way, right? So, and a lot of these people will say, "Oh, well, I didn't mean it," or "I was just joking," or "I was just having a meme," or something. But there's a lot of truth that happens through humor, as you well know, as someone who is involved in being professionally humorous for a time. Lots of the time, somebody tries to. A lot of the time, when you start joking about something, you actually will then start to believe it. So, yeah, lots of this stuff has happened at kind of a lower level, less the level of people making videos, and more the level of the kind of trashy comments or the Twitter discourse, things like this.
Well, I've definitely seen the annoying US accounts saying you lot should just overthrow your government. It's like, oh yeah, how many governments have you overthrown this week? Absolute nonsense. They're really annoying. But most of the stuff from sort of the oppressed white person, I don't think is superiority. It's a defensive posture. But like you say, definitely a fatigue, and they're sick of a lot of immigration and all that. Okay, this one might be a big one, but your next video was on nationalism. This was interesting. You suggested that you can really only be essentially imperialist and support the great powers like US, Russia, China. And when you're supporting something like Ukrainian nationalism, it's just a sort of sock puppet for US imperialism. So you're not really nationalist. That was quite interesting. And that you're always open to elite manipulation, therefore, if you become nationalist. And you pointed out how even in the war, it was certain countries could recruit much more, the war meaning the Second World War, could recruit much more easily based on nationalism rather than abstract concepts like the liberal international order and things like that. And you cite James Burnham there. But I have maybe this is a strange whimsical counter, but it struck me that there must be therefore some force to nationalism, some almost kind of quasi-spiritual force, because it is such a powerful idea, even if it's open to manipulation by elites. Ultimately, those elites still get crushed by the power of nationalism, because even the leaders, if they lose the war that they started, end up, dead in a bunker or something. So it struck me that you weren't really arguing with nationalism. Well, maybe you were, but nationalism itself is almost stronger than the elite's ability to control it, was something that occurred to me. But anyway, that's not necessarily contradicting your point, which is that really nationalism is largely illusory. Right? When you're supporting it, you're really being duped, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially let's think of the context of Britain in this current moment, okay? Just this morning, I saw a text, I saw a tweet from, what's that account called? Dissident West?
Is it Inevitable West?
Inevitable West, right? Who is widely thought of as being an Indian, yeah? And
post-nationality. There's that thing that they're going to force you to put where you are, right? That's meant to be coming in, but I haven't seen it yet.
And he put out a tweet quoting Elon Musk, saying that Elon Musk said everybody has to get behind Tommy Robinson, right? And I, without even thinking about it, posted the clip of Ed Miliband saying, "Get the hell out of our politics and out of our country," right? Because actually, if anybody was an actual nationalist, thinking in a nationalist way, they automatically would see Elon Musk coming in with his billions, a foreigner, supporting Tommy Robinson, who's just literally pledged allegiance to a foreign country, being tweeted by an account that is widely thought to be a foreign account, right? I mean, is this nationalism, or is this literally just doing the bidding? I mean, in this case, the bidding of America and Israel.
Yeah, I see your point. I think there's an argument, and Mike Cernovich was making it, that Britain needs to be liberated from our tyrannical government when we've had things like the grooming gangs and we can't close our borders and we're being killed and now stabbed in Uxbridge. So I think there's an argument for that, but I certainly see that it's not very nationalist to say that we need the US to rescue us. Though many people do think that now.
The correct frame would be, and I've got this from reading Patriots from, Major General Richard Hilton onwards, right? Would be, look, the only time this has happened in British history is when Britain was subject to the US empire. Since World War II, right, since 1945, that has been the only time where Britain has been subject to these sorts of pressures. Didn't happen before that because Britain was sovereign. It's happening now because this is what the US empire does, not only to itself, but to all of its vassal states. Every other country, right? And this is where it's obviously not a function of simply our government, because otherwise it wouldn't be happening in France and in Germany and in every other country. Germany is literally still under American military occupation. So let's just call a spade a spade. Now, the same power who subjected us to this has the audacity to turn around. We're going to liberate you from your own government. Our government is a function of your government because we're a vassal to you. So again, until I don't even like people calling themselves quote unquote nationalists, unless they're going to address these fundamental problems of sovereignty. So again, what I'm doing with this, Nick, is in a way showing how facile a lot of the discourse is. Because many so-called self-professed British nationalists spend all their time cheerleading America.
It's a very strong point. Enoch Powell felt the same about the American Empire. He was very clear it's not our friend from the 40s onwards. And one counter might be, although I know you would disagree already, but in the Trump-Vance era, that's a different era in America, and they'll bring something different. And they're also against the kind of forces that have caused all this. But you say they're not, so you've already dealt with that.
Yeah, look at Ukraine. Look at Ukraine. Nothing has changed at all. Absolute continuity agenda. There's a channel called New Atlas, Brian Beletic. Now, you may dislike his politics or whatever, bald chap. But from the day one, he said, look, when Trump gets in, there's not going to be a change at all. They've got a division of labor plan where America pivots towards China and Europe, mainly Britain and France, are going to be left to sort out the Ukraine bit. And it's a division of labor plan between the European NATO powers and the big hegemon America. America's going to deal with China. We're going to deal with Russia. That's the division of labor plan. J.D. Vance gave the speech in February. And this is the center bit. Rise above the slop. Okay? What's the slop? The slop is the moral lecture that J.D. Vance gives about free speech. Okay? We know the Trump administration doesn't care about free speech because they've spent the past 9 months banning anti-Semitism wherever they go. So clearly they don't care about free speech that much. Okay? So I'm not going to take the lectures from Vance there. The rise above the slop bit is ignore the Punch and Judy show, ignore the big show for the cameras, and look at what's actually happening. What is actually happening is there's a continuity agenda. Right? Trump, before the election, said he was going to end the Russia-Ukraine thing in one day. I think they've just signed a new check to send even more weapons over there. And really, that's how you can tell. That's often how you can tell how regime compliant any given figure is. Right? Well, that's how we knew that Richard Tice, for example, right? He was very pro-Ukraine. And if you remember, Farage for a little while was more ambivalent, but now he's on board with that. Or if you notice on the left, at the moment, they're pushing this guy Polanski for the Green Party. Right? Now, why is he there? Why is he all over the TV and not Jeremy Corbyn? Jeremy Corbyn was extremely critical of the whole Project Ukraine thing. Okay? Always outspoken on American neo-imperialist foreign policy, Corbyn. He had to be destroyed. And now he's got this new party. I know it's a shit show and all the rest of it, but it's being sabotaged. And the reason it's being sabotaged is because the system can't allow that there. It must maintain absolute compliance when it comes to these top line issues of national security, foreign policy, banking, and so on. They're not going to allow those things to be touched. And if you look at Polanski, basically, when it comes to Ukraine, he's just has the same policy as Richard Tice. The same policy, incidentally, as Keir Starmer, Boris Johnson, Rishi Sunak, and J.D. Vance, and Trump, ultimately.
All right, that is the end of the free episode. But if you want the full podcast, go to nickdixon.net for all the extra content, all my articles. That is my Substack, nickdixon.net. And we need your help to keep this whole thing going, keep the lights on, this amazing production, hiring people, etc. nickdixon.net to support us. It's £5 a month, which is about the cost of some sort of fancy latte in London, or there's a slight discount if you get the yearly option, or it's just £5 a month. So we'll see you on nickdixon.net, and thank you very much.